Today I'm chatting with Andreas from londoncyclist.co.uk. Andreas has built a business that allows him to travel the world and that allowed him to quit his day job. And the interesting part is that he stumbled on his business idea. He wasn't even an expert when he started. He simply started sharing what he knew and built a business around that. So in this interview, you'll discover exactly what he did, his biggest lessons, and his biggest mistakes. So I hope you enjoy the interview. So I'm here with Andreas from London Cyclist, and we'll be talking about how he's built up his business and what he's doing. So how are you doing?
Yeah, very good. Thank you, Henry. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome. So could you briefly introduce yourself? Like, who are you? What's your background? And what are you doing these days?
Okay, sure. I a couple of years back, I was working in London in a company, and I wanted to find some information about cycling to work and what some of the best bike locks to get are. Those simple things that are kind of really interesting to a new cyclist. And I started Googling around. I didn't really find that information online. So I thought what I'll do is I'll set up a cycling blog and I'll provide that information for other people. And the blog really took off really, really fast. It got very popular and it started getting good traffic. So I thought, right, this is an opportunity for a business here. So as soon as I finished university, I started working on my website full time, and within about 4 months, it was profitable. And since then, I've continued building up that website, which is londoncyclist.co.uk. And now I'm launching new iPhone apps and iPad apps.
So you basically started a blog that helps cyclists in London.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you help those people? I mean, you have a guide on cycling routes, you have an app, I think, and you do reviews and advertising. Is there something else you do?
Yeah, exactly. So it's a blog that provides plenty of tips and advice for new cyclists, and it kind of targets an area of the market that not a lot of people were addressing. So there's a lot of cycling magazines for those people that want to be at the high end of the market and they want to spend all this money and get a road bike and join a cycling club and do all of that experience. But at the lower end of the market, there's those people that just want to get to work every day using their bike. So there wasn't really anything there for those people. So I started to create it. And what I did was quite early on, as I surveyed my audience and I said, what is it that you'd like me to create, basically? So I came up with a few ideas, and I said, one of my ideas is a London cycle routes book. And there was this overwhelming support for this idea. A lot of people said, yeah, if you make this, then it's something that I'd like to buy. So I went away and I did all the research and I created this ebook. And then I started selling it to my audience, and it was a really big hit. It was very, very popular. So I started to, and that was the first product I ever launched. And that's what started to give me this income so I could keep running this blog.
Okay. And just backtracking a bit, what kind of work did you do before your London Cyclist blog?
I had a very boring job. I used to work as a market researcher. So basically, we'd get all these surveys in, and I'd have to analyze the data and provide recommendations for companies.
Okay, so you could say you were motivated to get out of there.
Yeah, definitely. I always just thought in the back of my mind that I was going to start my own business. I never thought it would be a cycling blog, but it seemed to just come along, and so I thought, right, I've got to go with this opportunity.
So how did you get the idea for a cycling blog? I mean, are you into cycling a lot yourself, or how did you come up with the idea?
That's the crazy thing is that I'm not really very much into my cycling. A lot of my friends, when I told them, for a while I was almost embarrassed. I didn't tell my friends that I had this blog and I was talking about cycling and things like that. And then suddenly they said, well, what are you doing for work? And I was like, oh, well, actually, I've set up this cycling website. So I never had a background in cycling, but that's what made me perfect in the niche, because all the other people were explaining things at a really high level, but I could come in and explain something in a way that everyone could understand, because I was a beginner myself. So I didn't start off as an expert. I've only become an expert the more I've been blogging and researching things.
That's interesting. So how did you know anything about cycling when you started a blog, or
Yeah,
what came first?
so the blog came first, really. I mean, I was already cycling in London, and all I started doing is, for example, as a cyclist, I'd have a problem. I'd say, well, I hear that all these bikes get stolen all the time. So what I would do is I'd go out and do some research on the internet and find out what were the best bike blogs. And then I'd simply write a blog post and say, look, these are the 4 best bike blogs. This is why I think you'll like this one. This is why I think this one isn't that good. And I just literally explained it in a way as if I talked to people in a very informal way, like they were my best friend. And the website has always had that kind of very friendly, approachable style. And I think that's what really people enjoyed when they were reading London Cyclist. They just enjoyed that I wasn't trying to be this super advanced cyclist. I was just one of everyone else.
So you basically just put out something that you found useful and people liked it, and then you started thinking that there might be something to this.
Exactly.
Okay, very interesting, because a lot of people get stuck on the idea that they have to be all-knowing experts before they start, but sometimes it can be better to just start from the beginning, start discovering stuff, and then sharing that stuff with your audience.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I think a lot of people get caught in that stage where they think, oh, but I don't know everything I need to know to get started. But it's better to just get started and then figure things out as you go along, basically, which is exactly what I did.
So what was initial progress like? I mean, you wrote this first article about the bike blogs, linked to them. What happened then? Did you start writing articles? How was traffic and all that good stuff?
Yeah, so one of the first big things that I did is I thought, right, I've started this cycling blog. I'm interested in knowing what other cycling blogs there are out there. So I just loaded up an Excel and I started Googling around and looking for bike blogs. And there wasn't really a big list of them anywhere. So I'd created this list in Excel and I thought, well, I've put all this time into creating this list. Perhaps this would be useful for some of my readers as well that also want to discover other cycling blogs. So I put together the list and I posted it on the blog. And then I sent an email to everyone that I'd featured in that list of the top 50 cycling blogs. And I sent them a message just saying, look, I've created this list. I find it useful. Maybe your readers will find it useful too. And I featured your blog in there. And a lot of those people actually linked back to it. This is the days before Twitter and Facebook. So a lot of people just wrote a new blog post and linked back to London Cyclist. And that gave me my initial sort of 30 or 40 backlinks that made Google realize that my site is actually quite important and that they should give it a higher ranking. So that's what initially launched my website.
So was that actually your first post on your site?
No, I think it was number 30 or something like that. It's quite early.
Okay, so what happened in the first 30 posts? Were you just covering the basics?
Yeah, I was just blogging about the things that interested me. Whether some news would come along, or whether I was just having some sort of thought related to cycling, or I discovered something interesting. I just blog about that. It's always been very easy to come up with new blog posts because there's just so much to talk about, even though it's such I guess from the outside, it looks like such a small area to focus on, cycling in London. But in fact, within that, there's a lot of interesting stuff that is worthy writing about.
So how do you come up with ideas? Do you have a specific process, or?
Yeah, I do. So I do a number of things. I subscribe to a cycling magazine so that I know roughly what products people are looking at. I also look at, I follow a ton of cycling blogs that talk about all the news and things like that. And then I tend to think a lot about some of the problems that people like me face when they cycle. So, for example, a lot of people face the problem of not feeling very safe when they're cycling. So, I talk about that a lot. As soon as because I am my audience, basically, it's very easy to see what kind of problems I'm facing. And I also spend a lot of time asking my audience as well what they think about certain topics. So, for example, what they think about cyclists going through red lights.
Yeah. So in those first 30 posts, what did traffic look like before you did that big post linking out to all these bike blogs?
Maybe, I mean, very low. I mean, maybe 100 views per day.
Okay. So it didn't happen overnight. You kind of built up and then you wrote the post.
Yeah, there's never an overnight success. No, so it definitely took a while.
Yeah. So it really comes down to, I mean, if anyone is launching anything new, you still need those links from other sites if you want the search engines to notice you. And I think you did a really good job by putting up a big resource, linking to other bike blogs, and then emailing them and getting links from them. And I'm assuming this is going to work much better in like the cyclist market compared to internet marketing, where it's been kind of overused.
Right, exactly, yeah. But it's still a technique that would be very good in a market that is perhaps less developed. But people will always link to interesting content. So, for example, one of the blog posts that we published more recently was what a fighter jet pilot can teach you about cycling safely. So it's incredibly interesting title that you're not going to read about somewhere else on the internet, and it's instantly very intriguing. So a lot of people link to that as well because it's such a unique piece of content, basically. So I think there's still a lot of value in publishing things that are very unique and very deep and interesting kind of thing.
Yeah, and the core concepts still work, because if you have content that's valuable, fascinating, interesting, or any of those things, people will be more likely to link to you. And a big part of it is also when you're starting out, you have to go out there and promote yourself. So you did this by reaching out and telling people about your post. Now you can always do this with social media and other avenues, but a big problem I see is that people put up content and they expect stuff to happen, but you really have to go out there and make stuff happen.
Yeah. I think my friend always says that content is king and marketing is queen. So you really need both elements.
Yeah. So did you do any search engine optimization, or do you do any right now?
No, all my friends who are also bloggers always get very annoyed at me because I never do any SEO. The thing is, I mean, my site very quickly became an authority on the subject of cycling in London. So what that meant is I got chances to appear on television and on websites such as the BBC and the Guardian. So I've always had a very good backlinking profile without really putting a conscious effort into achieving that.
Yeah, and that helps. And it seems like you're just focusing on the problems your audience is having, which is really, it's a natural way of doing search engine optimization, because when you optimize for search, you're just tapping into the language people are using in your market, and you're already doing that by having an audience. So it's a much simpler way to go about it.
Exactly, yeah. And I mean, all of my titles, I'm just careful that they are centered around keywords that I know people are searching for. So I know that people are searching for the best bike locks. I know that people are searching for, cycling routes in London. So I do always think about the kind of terms people are using to search, but I never go out of my way to do off-site SEO. But I guess a strategy that would work really well now is if I started approaching other big cycling blogs and saying, look, can I guest post for you? And can you give me a link back to my website?
Yeah. It's, if you can't get attention, you have to go out there and guest post or do something to get those valuable links to your site.
Yeah.
So when you launched your first book, when did you launch the book? I mean, you wrote the big resource post, you got some links.
Yeah. So
how long after that did you start working on the book?
Very, very soon after that, because what I'd done is I'd finished university, and I only had £4,000 to last me as long as I could, and that was some money that I'd saved, and so that money was starting to run out round about 4 months in. So I knew that if I hadn't got this book done by, let's say, month number 5, I wouldn't be able to continue living in London because I wouldn't have any decent income. So I had that deadline, and I went away and I created that book in the 4th month, and I launched it. So I already had a small audience when I launched the ebook.
So when you say small audience, how small is small?
I guess small is, let's say, I don't know, maybe around 700 about 700 subscribers to my newsletter.
Yeah, on an email list.
Yes, on Aweber.
And what did the launch process look like? Did you announce the book before you created it, or what went on?
I bought a online course by a guy called Jeff Walker, and he had a product called Product Launch Formula. And the basic premise of that is that your launch should be like a big event. And so people should get excited about your launch before it happens, and they should know that it's coming. And every week you should tempt them more and more to this new product that you're launching. So I got everyone very excited by talking about my product before it was ready. And then when I came to launch it, everyone knew that it was going to be available that day. And so there was a lot of excitement, and a lot of people downloaded it.
So how did you talk about the product?
So what I would do is I would perhaps share some early versions of the product. So I would share one of the routes that was included inside the product. So there was 30 routes in there. So I'd share maybe 2 or 3 of them in the run up to the launch to show people what it was going to be like. And I've done that with launches since then as well. So what I would do is I would say to people, look, I need a name for this. So I'd get people involved and help me choose the name for the product. So it's all about getting them not only excited, but also involved in the launch itself, so they feel that they are a part of it.
Okay. You released one piece. Did you do anything else?
I released one what? Oh, right. Other content. No, I just spoke about the product, really. So I just mentioned that I'm working on it. I've mentioned that I'd found some good routes. So I was always just giving away a little bit of information slowly, so that people were building up an image of this product before it was ready.
Okay. And then on launch day, you launched it. What kind of pricing did you settle on?
So I launched it as an ebook, and I used a service called E-Junkie to sell the product. And I priced it at £7.95, which is roughly $13. And this was a time before the Amazon Kindle. So I think nowadays people perhaps expect to pay less for an ebook. But at the time, it was at the time I was probably one of the first people to release, an ebook. So that pricing worked really well for me. It's always difficult to decide the price, but I guess you can look at it in a way of, well, if I double the price, will I halve the number of people that download it? Because I think most people tend to price things too low. But that worked really well for me, though, $7.95.
Yeah. Did you have any strategy behind the price, or did you just go after what felt good?
No, I just went after what felt good, really.
Okay. And something I forgot to ask you is, when did you start London Cyclist?
So I started London Cyclist in 2000 and it must have been 2011, I think. maybe 2010, 2011. No, actually, sorry, I tell a mistake. I think it's 2009.
Okay. So about 4 years, I guess.
Yeah, about 4 years ago, yeah.
So what happened after you released the book?
So the book did really well, and I got a ton of downloads, and I got some money together, and I spent that money so I could go do some traveling. I went to visit my friend in Brazil, and then when I came back, I decided that the next big product I wanted to release was a guide to maintaining your bike yourself. So one of the big problems that I was experiencing as a cyclist is that all these bike maintenance manuals were really frustrating to use because the explanations were so complicated. And bike maintenance is something that's very easy. So I looked at all these bike maintenance books and I thought, there's no way I can learn to maintain my bike using these books. So what I did was I started to create a guide that was way more simple, that really explained the whole process of how to fix something on your bike in a way that anyone could understand. And that took me 4, 5, 6 weeks of just me in my garden, just taking pictures and playing with my bike and things like that. And then when it was ready, I decided to contact somebody else who had launched an iPhone app, who was a developer. And I said, look, I like your app. I've got this idea. Do you want to work on it together and we'll split the profits? And so we partnered up and we created the app, which was called Bike Doctor. And
so was the app separate from the bike maintenance book?
No, the app was the only bike maintenance book. I never turned it into a book. I only turned it into an app. So I created the app and I partnered with him, and he did all of the development and I did all of the content. And then we launched it using a similar set of techniques to the last time and a similar philosophy, whereby by this point I had about 2,000 people on my newsletter. And what I did was I got them excited about the app. And then when I hit the launch button, it went straight to the #1 in the sports category in the iTunes store. So that then got us a lot of exposure within the App Store, and it had a big effect because a lot of our downloads just they went through the roof from there, basically, because we got featured by Apple as well. And so this app in the first month did really, really well. It started to be the biggest. It was earning far more than the rest of my site was earning. So I could tell that apps had a big potential.
So in terms of research, you mentioned that you basically created it for yourself because you didn't understand bike manuals. Did you ask your audience at all if they were interested in this, or did you just go ahead and create it?
I can't remember. I imagine I would have asked because that's usually where I start with new products. I ask first. So yeah, I think I would have asked.
Okay, so now you've got the book and you've got the app. What happened after the app?
So the app was a big success, and the blog was doing really well. So what happened afterwards is I got lazy. So I didn't really do much work for about 6 months. And I guess things started to slow down. And so eventually I thought, right, I need to come up with a new idea, some new products. So I launched some new products. I launched a new app that would show you all the bike shops in London. I launched another app that would show you where all the great bike rides are in London. So I sort of launched a few other products, but nothing really took off. They all made some money, but nothing really was that big. So that roughly brings us up to, if you flash forward a little bit, it brings us to where we are now. And now the site is doing better because it's earning more money through Amazon, through advertising. So it's got a very diversified stream of money. So it gets a little bit of money from everywhere. And what I'm doing now is I'm launching a new version of Bike Doctor, which will work on the iPad. And that's been, that's basically, that brings us up to date to where I am now. But the site, big trick recently, perhaps this is worth discussing more, is how I've removed myself from the management of the website. So recently I've been hiring part-time writers to create all the content on London Cyclist. So because I'm traveling from Vancouver to Antarctica, I haven't obviously I cannot be on top of the website every day. So I've hired a team of guys that now write all of the content for London Cyclist.
Okay, so where did you hire these people?
So what I did is there is a website in London called Gumtree, and it's basically a classified adverts website, very similar to Craigslist in America. So on there, I just posted up an advert that said, look, I'm looking for people to write for the website, and that they need to submit 3 bits of content. And if I like the content that they submit, then I'll take them on and I'll pay them per blog post. And that's been a really big change because it's freed up a lot of my time to be able to focus on some of the bigger projects rather than writing blog posts all of the time.
So how much do you pay these writers?
I pay roughly $20 for every blog post.
Okay, so I'm assuming they're into biking as well.
That's right, yeah. I'll always try and find people that are cyclists themselves and in London.
Okay, and how has that worked for you when you started removing yourself from the site?
Yeah, really good, because that gave me an opportunity because I think all entrepreneurs have the same problem. They think that they're the only person that can do the jobs within a business. But as a lot of the business books will tell you, it's better to work on your business than in your business. So, so what that allows me to do is then to set up processes and say to the writers, look, this is how we write a good blog post. And it starts when you start thinking about those processes rather than just doing everything yourself, you start to realize where there's room for improvement. And because you free up all this time, you can focus on projects that are far more profitable, but much more difficult to do. So for example, I can focus on launching a new app. And in the meantime, my writers can run my eShop, they can write the content, they can manage the comments. So they've taken over the whole kind of management role of the website.
Okay, interesting. So in terms of, if we look at mistakes that we haven't covered yet, is there any big mistakes you've made while you've built up the site?
Oh yeah, a lot of mistakes. I guess a big mistake was that when I was earning money, at the beginning, the site did really well. Roughly 12 months in, I was making a lot of money every month, but I wasn't investing any of that money back in the business. I was just spending it on holidays and on enjoying myself. And so that meant that there was never any excess money available to invest in new ideas. So that was one of the big initial mistakes that I made, is that I didn't try and live perhaps more simply and therefore have more money to invest in the business. So it took me longer to grow the business, because there came a point when, in the beginning, every product that I created, I could have created it myself. I didn't need to hire someone to help me. But the problem is there comes a limit where you can no longer do something yourself. I can't program, I can't graphic design. And so I didn't have money to invest in those people that I needed to push my business forward. So that's something that changed when I went traveling this time. So this time, now that I'm traveling, I'm living out here permanently. It's much more cheap living here than it is to live in London. So what I used to pay in London for my rent, I now use as my living expenses. So my cost of living has dropped so much that I've got a lot more money available to invest in business ideas. And that's one of the big advantages of, working remotely and being what they call a digital nomad.
Yeah. So basically you would have spent more or invested more in your site in the way of like a graphic designer, writers, and just outsourcing more things.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And I think what I should have done is just started sooner to save money and spend it on the website. Yeah.
Okay, and I wanted to ask you, is London Cyclist is your only site that you're running right now?
Yeah, it's my main website. I also do I don't really run this anymore, but I set up an online course that teaches people how to build their own successful iPhone applications, but it's not something that I actively pursue at the moment. So London Cyclist is my only business.
Okay. So are there any other mistakes that come to mind?
Yeah, well, one of the first mistakes that I made was that I didn't partner up with. When I created the first app, I partnered up with someone to create it. Now that meant that I had to split the profits, and it also meant that because we were partners, I couldn't tell them to do something, and I couldn't fire them. I couldn't get rid of them because we were partners in the business. So that was a big mistake because what I should have done is simply hired someone to build the app, and then if I didn't need them anymore, then I could have hired someone else to continue it. So one of the big early mistakes that I made is I entered a partnership rather than spending the money and building the app myself and being the only owner of that product. So I always try and teach people to do the same, that if they can find the money, then it's way better to build something where you're the only owner rather than to partner up and then have this split responsibility, because partnerships are quite difficult to turn into a success.
Yeah, especially nowadays when people are living in different countries and traveling all over the place.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I guess, is there any other mistake? Just so we can get a nice number.
Any other mistake? I guess perhaps I should have been a little bit better with my networking early on, because that's made a really big difference to my business. Now is that I've got a much better network of people that run very similar businesses to me. But it took me a while to kind of get to know those people. And I think perhaps if I'd been a little bit more active early on, then it would have made a positive difference in my business, because they could have given me really useful advice, and they could have shown me, just inspired me with the work that they're doing. So trying to build your network early on is quite a big thing.
So how did you get to know these people?
So eventually it kind of happened by chance. So I was on an interview very similar to this one, and I was being asked about my business and how I built London Cyclist. And then afterwards I said, thanks for the interview, etc. And I didn't hear off the guy that interviewed me for a while. And eventually he said, look, I've got this friend coming to London. I think you guys are going to get along. You should meet him. And I met his friend, and we got along really well. And then shortly afterwards, he said, actually, we've got this group, this like private group on Facebook, where it's just a bunch of entrepreneurs, and we get together and we discuss our businesses. And ever so often we all meet up together and things like that. And he invited me into that group. And that was the point when I went from knowing perhaps 5 or 6 people that ran online businesses to knowing about 50 people that ran online businesses. So it made a really big difference how quickly that network expanded. So those things are incredibly useful.
Yeah, it's fascinating how we stumble upon those things when we're ready.
Yes, definitely.
So the next question would be on productivity, and how do you get stuff done and avoid procrastination?
That's a great question. Productivity is always a challenge.
Yeah.
When you're running, I think, people are different, but for me, what works is a few basic things. So, for example, one of the habits that I've always tried to create is to try and reflect on where my business is at now and where I'd eventually like it to be. So, every morning I'll try and spend 10 minutes. So I'll tell you why I created this habit, because I went to meet the guys that created the Lift application, which is an application that allows you to track your habits. And they said that the number one habit that makes a difference as to whether people achieve their other habits is that they reflect. And what they mean by that is that they think about their business, and they take some time to take a moment back and think about where they are and where they want to be. And so I started adopting this habit. The other big thing that I do is that I try and set some negative outcomes. So I try and set some accountability. So if, for example, for example, at the start of the week, what I'll do is I'll give some money to my friend, and I'll say, "Don't give me this money back unless I do this list of things," and then I'll be really productive because obviously I don't want to lose that money. So that works really well for me personally.
So in terms of reflecting, what does that look like and how do you do it?
Yeah, it's difficult. It's one of those things that you can't just sit down one day and say, "Oh, I want to reflect." I think it's something that it takes a long time to be able to do that because our minds are always very busy. They're always thinking about a lot of things. So what I tend to try and do is when I wake up in the morning, I tend to try and stop for 10 minutes before I turn on my computer or my phone. And I tend to try and think, okay, so where are my apps? Where do I want to be? So where eventually do I want this business to be? Where do I want to be personally? What sort of person do I want to be, etc. What are my goals? And then I try and think about what that looks like in future. And then I try and come back to the present and say, right, well, what kind of day do I have to have today to make sure that those things are eventually going to happen? So it's about it's partly it's a mind game, right? It's a visualization exercise basically.
So do you do this in writing or just in your head?
No, just in my head. Maybe writing would be a good idea.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned this because I've just been writing a book and I stumbled on some research that show that when we daydream, there are actually regions in our brain that are activated that help you become more creative and help you solve problems more. And I've actually started doing this almost spontaneously, where I'll just lie down and start letting my mind daydream. Mm-hmm. And I do a lot of meditating. So sometimes I just meditate and then I go into daydreaming and back and forth. So it sounds like a similar process to what you're doing.
Yeah, it's a very useful tool, and I think a lot of people will try to do this, but they'll give up because they'll say, "Oh, well, I just started thinking about all the problems that I'm having, or what I need to do later on, or whatever." So it's quite difficult to get your mind to turn off and relax and then think about these things. Like meditation is a very difficult habit to achieve, I believe.
Yeah, and if you have trouble, a really good way is to just do this in writing. So start writing down and thinking through writing because that'll keep you focused and it really clears your mind as well. I think there's some research on journaling, which is basically writing, and it has a lot of interesting benefits like clarity, lowers blood pressure, and increases creativity and happiness and all kinds of good stuff.
Yeah, well, that sounds like a good habit to have.
Yeah. So you mentioned an app that helps you keep these habits. Was it Lift?
Yeah, it's Lift, and I think their website is lift.do. And it's an app for your iPhone, and you can access it on your internet browser as well. And it just shows you how many days in a row you've done your habit, and various other useful information and things like that. It's a good way of keeping track of things. And the good thing is that if you do it with a friend of yours, then they can see what habits you're doing and not doing, and so they can encourage you or get angry at you.
Yeah. Okay. So I really enjoy talking about these things because it's interesting because at the core, this really comes down to how we relate to problems, our mindset, and all that. Because if you can keep making mistakes, learning from your mistakes, you will eventually succeed.
And the one time in my life where I've been the most productive is when I was launching that ebook, because I had such a clear deadline. I knew that there was such a negative outcome if I didn't manage to do the ebook. I wouldn't be able to keep living in London. I have to go home and live with my mum. I didn't really want to live with my mum. So So there was this big negative outcome that would happen if I didn't finish this ebook. And so I had every motivation and I just blocked all other distractions. And in those 30 days, I was the most productive of my life. So if you can create something, I think it's very difficult to create that accountability because it just doesn't exist. You know, if you don't do your work in your job, then you'll get fired. But as an entrepreneur, if you don't do your work, then you'll just relax. So there's no sort of negative outcome. So I almost think you need to place that accountability, that negative outcome, so that you feel motivated to do it.
Yeah, I think one of the problems is for people who are stuck in their 9-to-5 jobs is that they are comfortable enough, so they don't really want to do anything. They just dabble in online business and read some stuff. But if they get fired and there's huge pressure on them, that's when things start happening because they have to make things happen.
Exactly.
And you mentioned this because you said once you started making enough money, you kind of started slacking off because you reached your comfort zone and things were going nicely. So
yeah, definitely. Yeah, as soon as I started making money, I got lazy.
Yeah, and I guess once you started seeing things decline, that negative pressure came back.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's I think we've got such limited willpower as human beings, don't we? So it's important to try and design your kind of work environment in a way that makes you productive, because you can't just say, oh, I'll wake up tomorrow and I'm going to be really productive. A lot of people, I bet everyone has done that at some point, when they'll say, oh, tomorrow will be different. Tomorrow is no different to today. If you haven't designed it in a way to make sure that you're going to be productive, you're going to be just as unproductive as you were the day before. So
a good way to think about, I mean, if you want to be productive, then think about how you can actually prove to yourself. For example, if someone told me that, I would immediately ask them to give me money I can hold on to, and then so they can prove that they've done it, and then I give them the money back. And most people don't really want to take me up on that.
It's I mean, that's the thing, is that we're far more motivated by negative outcomes than we are positive outcomes. So someone might think, oh, well, if I do this, then I'm going to get all these extra subscribers, and they think that that's what motivates them. But for some strange reason, as humans, we're more motivated by not losing something rather than gaining something. So it's quite annoying being a human, but you have to find a way around these human problems.
Yeah, but the good news is that if you're determined enough, you can make pretty much whatever you want happen. But you have to be willing to focus, put in the work, and just face a lot of discomfort.
Yes, definitely.
So we're coming to the end here, and I wanted to ask, what would you say to the Andreas just starting out if you could travel back in time and give him a few tips?
That's a good question. I would say to him, stop slacking around, stop being lazy. I'd say that I should not spend so much money early on, and instead focus on building the business. And then once I make more of an income, then I start to enjoy that money more. That would have been a really big thing. And the other thing is, I guess I would have said to myself to get started sooner. If I'd have started sooner, I would have been much further along in my business. And it's always good to just to not delay that first move, because as soon as you made that first step, it's a rolling effect. So get started as soon as possible, I'd say.
And was it again the fact that you needed to make money that got you going, or was it something else?
Yeah, it was the fact that I needed to make money is what got me going again. So I don't think money really motivates me, but I am motivated by being able to afford that kind of lifestyle that I want, basically. So I'm never motivated by saying, oh, I want X amount of money in my bank account, but I am motivated when I think okay, if I don't make this money, then I can't do the traveling that I want to do. So I try and look at it like that. One of my friends has got a really good way of looking at it. He says, if I don't, if he's ever having a day where he thinks, oh, I'm really not feeling it today. I don't want to do any work today. He'll sit down for a couple of minutes and he'll just think about those people that he is not going to help today because he's being lazy, because he's being unproductive. So he'll think about the kind of problems that those people are facing and how they won't get the solution because he doesn't want to do any work today. So that kind of visualization exercise gets him really motivated because he thinks, no, I really want to help those people. So that's a really good way of using visualization again.
Yeah, and another good way is to get kids and buy a house, so you have some real pressure on yourself. Then you'll suddenly become very, very productive.
Yeah, I'm sure that works. Quite a drastic measure, though.
Yeah. So, what's one of the biggest lessons you've learned from building your lifestyle business and London Cyclist?
I guess I've been amazed at how much more productive I am now that I'm traveling, because I always thought, if I was in London, in one place, then I'd just wake up every morning and I'd have, 7 hours to do all the work I want to do. But I tend to find myself slacking less when I'm traveling, because when I'm traveling, I know that I only have 1 month of good internet access, so I need to get as much done as possible. So I think it's amazing how much this kind of living and working remotely can make you so much more productive.
Yeah, I'm not sure which law it is. Is it Parkinson's law, which says that your work expands to fill the time available?
I know the law that you mean. It's not. I don't think it's Parkinson's law, but I know the one you mean. Yeah, it definitely does. When you say I've got 7 hours to do something, then it will take you 7 hours to do it. But if you've got hardly any time, then you'll get it done so much faster.
Yeah, exactly. So the thing is that you don't have to quit your job to build your business, because you can start right now with the time you have. You just have to focus on the right tasks.
That's correct, yeah.
So I guess we've covered a lot of good stuff. And the last question is, where can people find out more about you?
Yeah, sure. They can visit londoncyclist.co.uk, and we've got a button on there to subscribe to Facebook, or there's a contact page. So if they've got any questions about building apps or anything like that, then they can find me through there, and I'm happy to offer some advice, as long as people come to me with very specific questions, because it's surprising. A lot of people will often say to you, how do I build an app? And you think, well, I can't sit here for an hour and explain to you how to build an app. But if you've got a specific question like, well, how do I get this guy to give me press coverage? Then, that's a much more well thought out question. So yeah, people can definitely drop me an email through the contact page on londoncyclist.co.uk.
Awesome. So that's basically all the questions I have. So thanks for doing this, Andreas. I'm sure anyone listening to this has gotten a ton out of this, because I certainly have.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to talk to you today.
And that's that for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it, and remember that nothing happens unless you take action. So pick one thing from this interview and apply it to your life and business. And if you want more tips on how to turn your passion into a thriving business, visit wakeupcloud.com and make sure you join the newsletter and grab your free goodies. So that's all for now. I'll see you in the next episode.